Victor Caldwell had it all: wealth, power, and control. But there was one thing he couldn't buy: true loyalty. Surrounded by opportunists, he wondered if anyone around him would stand by him without the lure of money or power. So he set a test, one that would reveal who was truly loyal: a maid, a dog, and a fortune in cash. The stakes higher than ever. What Victor didn't expect was how much the truth would hurt. Hi, dearest viewer. If you're enjoying this story, a quick like or subscribe would be such a blessing. It helps me share more heartfelt stories with you. And if you don't mind, tell me where you're watching from. I read every single comment with a smile. Now let us get back to the story. The mansion stood like a monument to success, a towering, flawless structure that commanded the skyline. Every inch of it reflected wealth: marble floors that gleamed under the chandeliers, walls draped in tapestries woven by artisans who had never known the meaning of the word cheap. The air was thick with the scent of leather, polished wood, and expensive perfumes, an environment carefully curated, like the man who owned it. Victor Caldwell was a man who had everything: wealth, power, and control. At just 45, he was the epitome of success. He had made his fortune in real estate, transforming dilapidated buildings into luxurious penthouses. His name alone was enough to secure deals worth millions, his handshake more valuable than any contract. He was used to being the one in charge, always the one dictating the terms, always the one who walked away with the winning hand. His empire stretched across the globe, from the skyscrapers of New York to the exclusive resorts in the Caribbean. He was untouchable. Yet, despite all his wealth and influence, there was a growing emptiness inside him, a gnawing feeling he couldn't shake. The life he'd built felt hollow. His relationships, transactional at best, always felt like a delicate game of masks and facades. People smiled in his presence, but he couldn't remember the last time someone had truly looked at him, not as a billionaire, but as a human being. This sense of disconnection had brought him to a peculiar point in his life, a point where he no longer trusted the people around him. Was loyalty genuine, or was it just another commodity that could be bought? His maid, a woman named Clara, had always been respectful and obedient, but he couldn't help but wonder, what if she was just waiting for the right moment to betray him? And the dog, a loyal Rottweiler he'd raised since a pup, was no different. Was the animal's loyalty a simple consequence of training, or was there something deeper at play? Victor had spent weeks pondering this question. He had everything money could buy, but one thing still eluded him: the truth about loyalty. He couldn't shake the feeling that his wealth had warped the world around him, that people's loyalty to him was tainted by the allure of what he could offer. He knew he had to test it. He needed to see if loyalty could exist independently of money, of material temptation. The thought of losing the one thing that could still give him a sense of control was too much to bear. His mind was made up. Today would be the day. The plan was simple. He would orchestrate a scenario where both his maid and his dog were faced with temptation. He would put them to the test. Before stepping out of the mansion, he turned to the maid, who had just entered the room. Victor issued his instructions with the cold precision of a man who had spent his life controlling others. "Do not feed the dog," he told her. The maid, a woman named Clara, nodded quickly, as she always did when Victor spoke. She was young, in her late 20s, with soft brown eyes that had always seemed to hold a quiet respect for him. She had been with him for years, ever since he had hired her on the recommendation of a trusted associate. She was loyal, or so he thought. Later that evening, the mansion's front door creaked open, and Victor entered with 2 items: a suitcase stuffed with cash and a shopping bag containing grilled meat, still warm from the kitchen. He had purchased the best meat money could buy, knowing the dog would be drawn to it. The suitcase, filled with millions in dollars, was a tool, a weapon in his test of loyalty for his maid. The bag of meat was for the dog. Both items were carefully chosen for their respective tests. He walked into the foyer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floors. The house seemed eerily silent, the stillness of wealth weighing heavy in the air. The mansion, though pristine, felt almost suffocating in its stillness. The golden chandeliers above cast faint shadows on the walls, but none of the luxury around him seemed to matter, not today. With a deliberate motion, he set the suitcase on the floor, watching as the heavy case flung open. Dollar bills spilled out, scattered across the pristine marble like confetti in a world that no longer valued its worth. Beside it, he dropped the bag of meat, the scent immediately filling the air. Tender, sizzling cuts of beef, the kind his dog could never resist. He paused for a moment, watching the two items, the scattered money and the bag of food, side by side. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with the same precision, he collapsed. His body hit the floor in a controlled, dramatic fall, leaving him still and motionless.
The suddenness of it all. The sight of the open suitcase with the money, the fragrant meat bag beside him, was enough to stir the room into a quiet, tense anticipation. Clara, the maid, rushed in at the sound of the fall, her heart racing. She froze in the doorway, eyes darting between the two items, the money now strewn carelessly across the floor, and the meat now exposed in all its tempting glory. Her gaze flicked to Victor's still form, her pulse quickening. The tension in the air was almost palpable. The stakes were clear. Would the maid hold her ground? Would the dog, hungry but loyal, make the right choice? The silence stretched on, hanging heavy, as if the mansion itself awaited the test's outcome. Victor Caldwell's fall to the floor was no mere accident. It was part of the test, carefully orchestrated, meticulously planned. As his body collapsed, it hit the marble floor with an almost theatrical grace. His eyes shut, and the stillness of his form was uncanny, as if time itself had been frozen. His hand fell loosely beside him, brushing the open suitcase he had dropped upon entering, the contents spilling out like the scattered pieces of a puzzle, unfolding the price of his test. Money. Stacks of bills, crisp and pristine, now lay in chaotic disarray, as though the universe itself had collapsed alongside him. The aroma of grilled meat, rich and tempting, wafted through the air, filling the room with the intoxicating scent of luxury. The bag sat beside him, an unspoken invitation to the dog. A feast, a simple pleasure, but one that could sway the loyalties of anyone who came near. The silence in the room was suffocating, but it didn't last long. Clara froze, standing at the threshold. She felt as though she was caught in a moment that would define her. The billionaire's collapse, the money scattered at her feet. She had heard about men who tested people this way, who pushed others to see where their true loyalties lay. But she never imagined she would be the one being tested. Victor had been more than just an employer to Clara. He had given her the job that she had worked hard for, pulling her out of a life of uncertainty and struggle. She owed him everything. Her steady job, the quiet life she had now, the roof over her head, everything had come from his generosity, his trust. She had worked for him for years, been loyal, always doing what was asked of her. But now, faced with the choice of loyalty or temptation, she was caught. The money that lay before her was more than enough to change her life, to free her from the restrictions of her current world. It was enough to get her out of the life she had been clawing at for years. Her thoughts spun. She had never seen money like this, never even dared to imagine it. She could walk away from this, start over somewhere far away, free from debts, free from the past that held her back. But could she betray him? Betray the very trust he had placed in her? She glanced down at the dog, whose eyes met hers. It was hungry. She knew that much. She had followed Victor's orders, not to feed the dog today, to make sure it was starving for the test. She had obeyed him, thinking it was a simple task, but now, with the dog's eyes pleading and the temptation of the money so overwhelming, Clara felt her resolve crumble.
Her breath caught in her throat. She was torn. Could one small slip, just one moment of weakness, really hurt him? No one would ever know. She could take just a little. She could justify it later, maybe say she hadn't meant to take so much. She could tell herself it was just for once, that she deserved it. No harm, no foul. The tension in her chest grew unbearable. Her hand shook as she reached down, fingers brushing the crisp bills. The paper crinkled under her touch, each sound like a small promise she was making to herself, a promise of escape, of freedom. She bent lower, gathering the money, her hands trembling with both guilt and excitement. She stuffed the bills into the deep pockets of her apron, trying to stay calm, trying to reassure herself. The world outside of this room was full of promises. She had worked for this moment, worked for him, but now she was working for herself. She needed this. She deserved this. Victor wouldn't know. He wouldn't understand the desperation she felt, the crushing weight of wanting something more than the small life she had. The room was thick with tension. The faint scent of grilled meat filled the air, its irresistible allure hanging like a haze around the lifeless billionaire. The dog, a loyal Rottweiler that had been with Victor for years, stood frozen just inches from the bag of meat, its nose twitching in the air. The rich aroma taunted its senses, stirring every fiber of its being, yet it made no move to devour the prize. Instead, its gaze never left its master. Victor's command was clear. Don't feed the dog today. The dog had gone hungry, driven by a strange order it could not understand, but instinctively obeyed. It was only a test, yet for the dog, the choice was simple. Loyalty had been its guiding instinct since the moment it had entered the billionaire's life. The temptation of the food, though strong, was nothing compared to the bond it had with the man lying still before it. The dog paced back and forth, its stomach growling, but its eyes never strayed from Victor's motionless form. It was starving, but its loyalty to its master outweighed the need for food. The dog nudged his master's hand, gently at first, but then with increasing urgency. It pushed its nose against Victor's arm, as if trying to rouse him from the death-like sleep he seemed to be trapped in. The dog's large body shifted from side to side, its paws heavy on the polished marble floor, but it didn't move towards the food. The meat was there, tantalizing, but the dog's instincts had always been clear. Loyalty first, instinct second. Victor had spent years shaping the world around him to fit his needs, controlling everything in his path. Wealth, power, and respect came easily to him, but trust, real, unshakable trust, remained just out of reach. The people he worked with, the staff that catered to his whims, the colleagues who attended his high-stakes meetings, all of them had a price. There was always something in it for them, something that kept them coming back, that kept their loyalty anchored in the benefits they could reap. But this dog, this animal who had no concept of money, had nothing to gain by staying loyal, yet here it was, still by his side, its loyalty more steadfast than anything Victor had ever witnessed. The dog nudged again, this time harder, pressing its nose into Victor's arm with such force that its tail wagged in agitation. The billionaire's eyes flickered for a moment, the first sign of life since he had collapsed, but he did not move. He lay there, half aware, watching as the dog continued its efforts to wake him. In that quiet moment, something shifted within Victor. The test he had set up, the one designed to expose the true nature of loyalty, suddenly felt hollow. Here was the answer he had been searching for, wrapped in fur and bound by instinct. The dog didn't care about food. It didn't care about the terrible hunger stinging his stomach, nor the rewards Victor could offer. All it cared about was Victor's safety, his well-being, and the unspoken bond they shared. It understood loyalty in its purest form, without condition, without expectation. Clara was still busy packing the money, but as the last bill disappeared into her pocket, she heard something that made her heart stop.
A slight sound, a movement, a flicker of light in the corner of her vision. Victor's eyes opened. At first, it was subtle, a twitch, the slightest hint of movement, but then it became immiscible. His gaze met hers, his eyes flashing with a piercing intensity that sent a jolt of panic through Clara's veins. She froze, the guilt crashing over her like a tidal wave. The money she had just stolen felt like a foreign object in her pocket, the weight of it unbearable. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. The moment stretched into eternity as she stared at him, hoping, praying that he hadn't seen. But his expression said it all. He had seen everything. Victor didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His gaze alone was enough to make Clara's knees go weak. The test was over, and she had failed. She had chosen the money. Victor's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his eyes moved toward the dog. The dog, still standing beside him, had not touched the meat. It hadn't been swayed by the temptation that so easily corrupted Clara. It had remained true, loyal, as if it understood something Clara had forgotten. Clara swallowed hard, her throat dry, her hands still trembling. Her mind raced to find words, to explain herself, but there were no excuses. She had betrayed the one person who had trusted her, the one person who had given her everything. The weight of her failure was too much to bear. Victor finally spoke, his chest low, almost a whisper. "You've made your choice, Clara, and it speaks louder than any words could." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. The test was simple. She had failed, and now she knew the consequences would be more than just losing.
Her job, the betrayal she had committed, was something that couldn't be undone. It had changed everything between them, and Victor knew it. Victor's chest rose and fell as he took a deep breath. The reality of the situation hit him like a thunderclap. The dog, hungry and desperate, had passed the test without hesitation. The very animal he had underestimated, the one that lived outside the world of materialism, had demonstrated what it meant to be truly loyal. No bribe could break its devotion. Victor let the silence stretch between them. The emotional complexity of the moment struck him with such force that he couldn't speak. His pride in the dog was overwhelming, but the disappointment in Clara ran deeper than he could have imagined. The dog had passed the test with no knowledge of wealth, no understanding of human temptation, yet it had understood loyalty in a way that Clara had failed to grasp. Clara shifted uncomfortably, her hands wringing the hem of her apron as her gaze dropped to the floor. She had known, of course, that Victor was testing her. She had known that he had set a trap, but she had convinced herself that a little slip would be harmless. After all, who would ever know? But now, in the stillness of the room, with the dog faithfully guarding its master, Clara understood that her failure was not just about money. It was about something far deeper. It was about trust, and she had betrayed that trust in the most devastating way. Victor slowly sat up, his back stiff, his movements deliberate. He turned his eyes to Clara, who flinched under his gaze. There was no need for words. The truth was clear. The disappointment in his eyes said everything. Clara's choice was final. She had allowed greed to overshadow everything she had worked for, everything she had been trusted with. In a single moment, she had broken the bond they shared, and nothing could undo that. The dog sat down beside Victor, its head resting on his lap, looking up at him with eyes that seemed to understand the weight of the situation. It nudged him once more, offering silent support. For a moment, the billionaire stroked the dog's head, feeling the warmth of its loyalty seep into his fingertips. There was no doubt now. This dog was the only true companion he had ever had. Clara, still standing by the door, took a small step forward, her voice trembling. "Sir, I didn't mean—" But Victor raised a hand, silencing her. There was nothing she could say. Her actions had already spoken louder than any apology could. The trust she had broken was irreparable, and the weight of that betrayal hung heavy in the air. Victor stood, his movements slow and purposeful. He glanced at the dog once more, a quiet sense of gratitude washing over him. The animal had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. True loyalty cannot be bought. It is not contingent on wealth or status. It comes from within, unshaken by temptation, and often it comes from the most unexpected of places. Without a word, he walked past Clara, his decision clear. She had failed the test. The door to her future with him had closed, and there was no going back. As he passed her, the only sound in the room was the soft click of his shoes against the marble floor, echoing in the silence. As the billionaire and his loyal dog walked away, leaving behind the shattered trust of a maid consumed by greed, one truth remained undeniable. Loyalty cannot be bought. It must be earned. Sometimes the truest bond comes from the most unexpected of places. What would you choose if you were tested in the same way? Can loyalty truly survive in a world filled with temptation? Comment below and share your thoughts. Let's start a conversation on the true meaning of trust. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping stories that challenge the very essence of human nature.